Okay, so my name is Daniel Kennedy. I'm Head of Digital Consultancy at Experian Marketing Services. Today I want to talk about efficient and effective customer-centric experience design for cross-channel. The reason for talking about this is a lot of our clients come and ask us about how do we get started doing journey design, is what it's traditionally referred to. And so we developed this methodology which we'd like to share with you today, which we believe it makes it pretty simple, pretty straightforward for something which is typically considered to be quite daunting. So I think first of all, it's worth recapping what's changed. So talking about today's consumer being a multi-channel consumer in a multi-channel world means that we have to say goodbye to our old friend the funnel, where it was very straightforward. We have control over the pretty much linear customer journey, and we welcome a new non-linear surround sound experience where purchase opportunities are there as and when a customer feels the need to find them, to discover, learn about products and services. So designing for unique customer journeys where maybe this one funnel design here works once is a little bit different, but we don't want you to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not too different, and we've got a nice approach to deal with that. The journey is effectively still linear. It's simply that nobody really goes from start to finish on exactly the one that you design. They dip into different parts of it. So that means that what becomes more important than the whole is the individual touch point on that journey, because you know for a fact that that customer is going to go through one step or two steps of this. And the thing that needs to change as somebody developing contact and content is you need to think about what that customer has seen before and what she might do next. So what kind of interactions has she had with your brand or with other providers, and what are the natural and logical next steps. So before we get on to that, I think it's worth referencing what we see as the tenets of good customer contact, and these are almost used kind of a benchmark to say, am I getting it right? So the first is desirable. So the contact needs to be welcome and expected and necessary. If you're making something which is not any of those three, then forget about it, do something else. Next, that it needs to be usable and accessible, clearly communicated, and that's specific to the device that that individual might be using. So understanding what that could be or designing that responsively is very important. Next, it needs to be useful, relevant and personalized to that individual's needs. It needs to be something with a clear and obvious next step and action. And finally, and I think potentially most importantly, it needs to be delightful. And that can be anything down to a service message. It can be delightful, it can be in your brand voice, it can be with nice imagery, it can be conveniently timed, it can be sympathetic to your customers' needs. So I'm going to read through these steps for you. We have 6 steps. It's a very straightforward process, but we have an additional 7th, or step 0, which we add in first, which is to start with your characters. The only thing that I'm going to assume is that you have personas to fit your customer segments, and that indeed you have customer segments. If you don't stop and invest in this now, characters are essential to stories. If you think about plot-driven drama, it gets dull really quickly. We've all seen Lost. So make sure that your stories have good characters, have a good understanding of the way that character behaves and what they do, and that really drives them forward. Marketers best understand people, not segments. So set up personas that reflect your consumer attitudes and behaviors that you update on a regular basis really will unlock productivity in your marketing department. You're giving somebody really amazing tools. The rest of it kind of falls into place quite nicely. So if that's something that you're struggling with, Experian have a lot of experience of this, so do get in touch and we can help you out there. But I'm going to assume that for the sake of the rest of this webinar, that you've got these already. So the next step is then you write out a story. Pick something simple to start with. If this is the first time you've done this, pick something really straightforward. I've got an example I'm going to show you of an abandoned car story, which starts with somebody coming through a Facebook advert. If that's too complicated, if that's not something you're comfortable with, pick something really simple. If it's an email, what about the unsubscribe experience? So write out this story, think about the way your character behaves, refer to your character by name, think about what else is happening in that individual's life, think about what kind of device they like to use, think about how they behave in social media. you can use loads of resource available to create this story. You might think, I'm just making it up, but go and have a look at your call center logs. You might have already done some user experience research. You've got web analytics sitting there. You've probably got a good idea of what people typically do. Use that as your starting point and write out a story from start to finish. You can go into explicit detail here. There's no kind of wrong amount of detail. This is just a starting point, just a theme. You're going to pick this apart later, so don't worry too much, but write this out, whether it be on a post-it note or whether it be a small novel. The next step is to chop this into chunks. Now, this may seem kind of obvious, and it is, and that's good, but what you need to think about here is that these chunks and these chunks can happen across multiple different channels. These chunks have a starting point and an end point. So when you're chopping them up, thinking, okay, what is this one action? Is this one experience? Like in this case, somebody sees a Facebook ad and they click on it. The starting point is that they're on Facebook, they see the ad, they click on it. And then the next, they land on the website and they select a product. That's the end point. Next, they enter the, so they're on the website, they have something else to do. So in my story, in this case, the doorbell goes, somebody leaves their laptop, they have to go to work, a basket recovery mail pops up, they enter their email address in there, and they're gone. That would normally be the end of a journey, but in this case, we're giving them a way back in. Next, they get an email, and they click a recovery link. They land back on the website, and you've done such a great job that they check out and they get an email to confirm it. So here we have 6 really simple steps, very straightforward. So you probably can guess my next step, which is now you identify what are the triggers here and what are the goals. So again, thinking about stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know the middle because that's your main step. Now you need to define what the beginning and the ends are for each of these mini stories. The target audience not being in a custom audience might be a trigger for Facebook ads. So I don't know this person, but they're in my target. They meet the demographic definition. I want to show them an ad. I show them the ad and they click it and they land on the website. So that's my goal for that person. Next up, I know they came from Facebook because that's my inbound traffic source. I'll probably tag that really nicely. So my analytics engine knows who that is. I've maybe delivered them a personalized version of a page and it's got the right product on there because that was the product that was in the advert. They basket the product because they've done such a great job already, but then it idles and I pop up a modal as a response to that. I save that email and I trigger an automated email which comes a few hours later when it's convenient for that person to take the action. And then that person clicks on that recovery link and land back on the website. Again, I know where they came from because I sent the email. They land on the website, show them their basket as it was, they complete the transaction. In this case, they get an order confirmation, and we've been smart enough to include a share button there so people shout about what they're buying. So very straightforward, beginning, middle, and end. At this point, I'd say it's probably worth then looking at some of your research sources to see how well this is working right now. So have a look at your web analytics and understand, okay, is this happening or are there some blockers here? It wouldn't surprise me if after going through at least one of these, you find a blocker immediately that you'd either forgotten about or you didn't even know was there or you hadn't even considered, simply because you weren't looking at it closely enough, you weren't thinking through the natural steps, you were too focused on the initial communication but not necessarily what happens after, or that's somebody else's department and I don't deal with that. So these are big blockages or bumps in people's personal experience, and these affect your brand really badly. So make a note of those as they happen and make a note of what your current success rate at each of these steps is, and that'll give you an idea of where you can maybe optimize in the future. Okay, so next, and this is the kind of newish bit to it, we have something called an empathy map. So an empathy map is not a new idea at all, I don't claim to have invented it. What we have done is we've stripped it right back. So when we've gone through this previously, we found that you can do a lot more than this, you can put a lot more detail in than this, but usually these 3 things that you add in the empathy map are the most important things, and they certainly determine the kind of communications you put together. So now you've got your trigger, your channel step involves the activity, and your goal, and you're going to add in here what you see, what that person will see rather. what they will feel, and that's not just what they do feel as a result of what you're showing them, but how they might feel in general about the whole thing, and what they do. And that's, again, not just what you want them to do, but what else they might do. So let's take the example of the Facebook ad. We know that they see a relevant ad because we served it to them, and we know what relevance is, so we're happy with that. We know that they will feel intrigued and inspired by our ad, or they may feel pestered, or they may feel it's inappropriate. So these are other things that you need to consider. And what will they do? Well, they'll click the ad and they'll land on your website, or they'll ignore it. Or maybe they'll go into a search engine and search for your brand or your product. They'll stay on that journey, but they'll find another door, they'll find another way in, either because they don't trust advertising, they don't like it, or they just prefer to do their own research. They don't feel too influenced by you. So we go further up the chain here. For example, if you're on the site and you pop something in your basket and you're idling, it's kind of nice to have abandoned basket email model pop up. Gives you an opportunity to save that basket, and that's what your customer will see. They'll feel safe as a result of that, secure and considered. They'll enter the email, but they may also ignore that, or they may continue to check out, and so that journey will fork. What's important here is that you're thinking about what they might do, you know what you want them to do, but you're also thinking about exactly how they feel and what they see and what the result of that is. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing, I think, too complicated in this. The only difficulty is, well, how would you do this? This is a nice slide I put together for you to show you it. And what we found is that the easiest way is to write your stories out as a group. If you're going to work on more than one at once, it's a nice idea. You split this into teams and everybody works on a story. Then you can chunk it up yourself. That's pretty easy to do, and you can add your triggers and goals. Then you book some time in together. You can run a workshop, and we've facilitated these in the past as well. It's a very effective way of doing it. You get in front of a whiteboard, you get some post-it notes out, you map out this, you print out what you've got already, and then you start adding in what do people see, what do they feel, what do they do. It's at this point where you can say, well, okay, how do people feel about that? What evidence do we have to say that people do feel assured and welcome when they get an automated email that has basket recovery information in it? What's the sentiment there? Is there any way that I can measure that? Is there any evidence that that does work? Are we doing it at the right time? Are we doing that in the right way? Is that obvious enough? What's my creative like there? What about these bits of the puzzle that maybe don't already exist? So maybe I don't do that at the moment, or I don't do Facebook advertising from a custom audience. How do I start doing that? What effect would that have on our business? So what we're doing is workshopping it and coming together and understanding and truly understanding that customer. You come back to your customer persona and say, is this realistic? Is this accurate for that person? Is that real for that individual? Would they really behave in this way? Would they really use that device? Would they use their phone? Would they use a laptop? Would they use a tablet? Would they use multiple devices at once and expect it to just kind of go everywhere? And really kind of drill into the detail here. Okay, so I always make a joke at this point, which is that what this creates is the thing that marketers hate the most. I used to be a client, so I know this only too well. And it's a brief. Briefs are really a pain to write when you don't really have a clear idea of what it is you're trying to achieve, or you have a rough idea but you can't really pick it apart. What this does, it picks apart the core elements to that brief, so you now know where this starts, you now know what the person needs to do, so what you're requesting that they do, and what the goal is, and even how to measure it is right there. But you might also have, what else they might do, and what other considerations you need to build in there. You know exactly what they need to see, so you've got quite a descriptive brief here of exactly what you want this basket email to be, how you want somebody to feel, and that's going to be very powerful for your creative team to go and actually put this into artwork. And then what you want them to do, so providing the right options. So it may even be that a view basket is not necessarily the only call to action in an abandoned basket. Maybe it's that I don't want these anymore, clear my basket, or I want to shop for something else. Or maybe they automatically, that already that they're like a discount. You can put a discount in there for that individual customer. You create then your content. So in this case, we've created it for our demo store cellmate, where it's the abandoned basket. But in order to make that customer feel more assured, we've not just included line items of the brown lace-up boots or the cream bubble cardigan. We've included images of it as well to make it more interesting, to make you feel, again, inspired and welcome and confident that that's the right product for you, remind you what you were there for in the first place. We've got a nice, clear, punchy call to action. So now it's time to check, is this content desirable? Yeah, well, yes, I asked for it. I asked you to save my basket and you emailed it to me. Is it usable? Does it have an action? Yes, it does. Look, there's one there. Is it useful? It has the information I need. Yes, I can action this. And is it delightful? Well, hopefully it is. We've gone a little bit further than we might normally have, and we've put great big images in there. So it's really good, and we also tell you when your basket's going to run out. We've personalized it. It's a good piece of content. So that's it. We've gone from writing out a story, which seemed a bit silly at the start, probably. We've chopped it into chunks and started to make a bit more sense. We've thought about what those goals and triggers are within that journey. We've identified those really clearly so that we've now got a set of metrics behind this so we can judge how well this is working as an individual interaction. But we're also thinking about really what we want a customer to feel, what they might have seen before. So we can say, yes, we're confident this is a good piece of content. What do we do next? Well, you deploy it. So not only do you have a brief for your piece of content, you need to maybe remake it yourself, or you have somebody do that for you, but you also have a schematic. You have a map showing you step 1, step 2, step 3. This is how I actually deployed my marketing suite from start to finish. So the important thing to think about is this is no longer a funnel. This is no longer a journey that you have control over. You have control over the experience at any given touch point, though, and that's still very much the case. You have control over what we kind of like to call micro experiences, where you know what somebody may have done before, what you want them to do later, what else they may do, but in that touch point at that time, this is your only opportunity with that customer, and that's kind of how you've got to treat it. So in summary, use the information you've got around you. Don't think that since this is a piece of user experience design, you necessarily need to go and do a load of research and then pay an expensive user experience agency to go and design it for you. You're good marketers, you can do this yourself, it's very likely. You have a lot of that information already, probably not necessarily structured in the way that you'd want, but you have your web analytics, you have things like call center logs, you can probably have product reviews, where you can start to get a sense of what kind of an experience people are having. Be careful here not to focus too much on the anecdote. When you're looking at things like call center logs, look for themes, look for patterns, look for things that happen to a cohort of individuals, not just a single individual, and solve for those. They're the things that are the Pareto actions. Start simple, don't be put off. Think about something that you can achieve and you can do, but don't limit yourself too much. Don't worry too much about the fact that the detail is pretty much endless here, and you could do this, you could do that, anything could happen. So think about this in as general terms as you feel comfortable, and don't worry that any detail that you maybe have missed will come out in that workshop stage, will come out when you start to add that empathy map on anyway. Make sure you're mapping every channel, and I really emphasize this, not just from a cross-channel marketing perspective, but also if you don't look after your digital presence, for example, if you don't look after your in-store presence, if you don't look after your emails, if you don't look after your call center, don't let that stop you from mapping it. You might not be able to control it, but you certainly will be able to understand the experience that somebody has using it, and that's going to reflect the way that you develop your content. You can be sympathetic, you can understand what that customer's necessarily been through, and you can also understand that they've had a great time in it too. Understand your audience, very, very key to make sure that you truly do understand what kind of people are buying your products, how they like to be treated. Make sure that you are, fully comfortable with what kind of, for example, device they use or how they like to behave. And finally, measure and optimize. Go back and look through this once you've deployed it. Test it. Could it work harder? Is there any point where there's a breakage? Can you understand why? Is there something not happening as you expected? Go back, change it, test it. So I'll give you a moment to enter any questions if you have them. Okay, so we have one here. How can I measure success of a recently implemented change of a customer experience design? So it's a good question. We'd always recommend that you use a control group where possible. When you change a whole journey, it can make using a control difficult. In the very worst case, then get a historical benchmark of your previous journey or the previous steps in your journey, and you can compare that with your change. But ideally, you should use a control cell in there. Okay, we've got another one. What if my personas aren't accurate? Is it still worth doing? Quite honestly, I would say if your personas aren't that accurate, it's more important that you keep a fresh view of the way those customers behave. So it's likely that your persona will change over time. If you're still using personas from the 1990s, then, well, life has moved on since then. It's time that you updated them because their behavior will really, really shift. And things that you might have assumed previously that they didn't like, they might actually now love, see the convenience in. So I would say, depending on how out of date they are, it's probably worth going back and making a change. Okay, and we have what sort of results would you expect? Which is a very vague question, but a good one, a fair one. So it's hard to give you a specific answer. It sort of depends on how bad things are right now. But I would say that from what we've seen, you'd be quite surprised how quickly you find a breakage or a blockage or something that wasn't quite as great as you thought it was, just having that fresh set of eyes on it. So it almost kind of pays for itself in that respect. And you have to think about the way to measure customer experience improvement is long-term. It's not, it will give you some immediate return, but you're talking about increasing customer lifetime value or increasing an NPS score, which is linked to your lifetime value of your customer. So the measure for it may not be exactly as effective as do I do a campaign or not, but it's a long-term improvement. And somebody's asked, it seems like a huge project. Is there any particular area or customer type I should focus on, or should I just attempt a blanket approach? I would say do start small. Pick something really simple. Don't try to do everything at once. Certainly, it's a learning curve to do this. But do focus on a limited number of, or a limited selection of your personas or segments. Pick your most profitable or your most popular segments so that you're affecting the majority of experience. Some examples of simple journeys would be an abandoned basket that you've just seen. A really simple one will be an unsubscribe or harvesting reviews. It's a pretty straightforward one. These are like 2-3 step journeys, don't take very much, but you can really go in there and optimize. So I think we're just about out of time. If you did ask a question, we'll get back to you as soon as we can, probably in the next couple of days. If you have any questions following this, do feel free to get in touch with me. Other than that, thanks very much.